Hey, everybody. It's Erin Schertz, your marketing manager for Roots Tech, back again with a special guest and speaker, Lisa Listen. And she's probably familiar to you already because she has been part of our lives before. And she's also been going to Roots Tech and speaking at Roots Tech and part of Roots Tech for a long time. So if you're familiar with Roots Tech, you might be familiar with Lisa. And if you're not, you're going to be. She is going to give a talk today about culinary heritage, finding home at the dinner table, which I am so excited about. We've been looking forward to this for about a month since we put it together, and you're in for a treat. But before we get started, let's have you guys comment. Make sure you can hear us properly and that everything's okay. I'm going to introduce Lisa in a minute, but we'd love to know where you're watching from. We love to see all of those countries and cities and places come in to tell us where you're tuning in from. And of course, and as always, please put your questions here at the end of the presentation. We'll be able to answer your questions. Lisa has a wealth of knowledge and information that we would love to help answer your questions with. So with that, I'm going to introduce Lisa. First of all, Lisa, how are you?
I am well. Thank you so much, Erin. I'm so excited to be joining you tonight.
I'm so excited too. And you're coming from the East Coast, right?
Yes. So I'm in North Carolina, as you can probably tell by my accent. But that's
yes. And we have Elizabeth McNally, another East Coaster watching from Virginia. So thanks, Elizabeth, for being here. For the others that are watching, tell us where you're coming in from and tuning in from. We love to see that. And with that, I am going to tell you a little bit about Lisa. So Lisa Listen is the genealogy expert behind Are You My Cousin? And by the way, she puts out a fabulous monthly newsletter that you have to sign up for. I always love getting it. Actually, you probably do something more than monthly, and I love it.
Every week.
Every week. Weekly newsletter, which is fantastic. So, and she has a website designed to help genealogy researchers. You guys, just when I need to introduce, I have something in my throat. Let's see if I can get through this. She helps genealogy researchers around the world grow their family trees without the overwhelm, which we all know can be overwhelming. Through hundreds of genealogy articles, YouTube videos, and international speaking opportunities, including Roots Tech, and we're so honored to have her with us and be able to do this for all of you. Lisa shares research strategies and how-to genealogy tutorials. Callisto Media recently published her latest book, 100 Questions for Grandma. And I actually want you to tell us a little bit about that, if you don't mind, because that's really interesting. I think something a lot of people would love access to. And then we'll get into your presentation.
Oh, wonderful. Yes. Thank you so much, Erin. Yes, the book, so 100 Questions for Grandma, is designed, it's literally 100 questions that I created that helps to gather your grandmother's story. It's perfect for what I call that icebreaker. It doesn't necessarily need to be done in order, but it's a wonderful thing, I think, if you have an elderly or a grandmother or somebody, any really woman in the family, to have that book so that if you go visit and you need those conversation starters, or children who oftentimes are needing to find oral history stories for school projects, it's wonderful to say, well, why don't you ask Grandma about this? Talk about, so for instance, one of the questions is about learning how to drive and when they got their license, because at the time I remember teaching my children how to drive and how nerve-wracking that was, and telling the story about how my grandmother, sharing with them how she had literally, she hit a fence post on the way to get her license. So that really kind of broke that ice, and that she could share that story with them. And they're like, okay, good, I'm going to make it,
That's classic.
Again, so it's on Amazon. It's also on my website, so you can find it either place.
Oh, I love that. Okay, I'm going to go check that out. So without further delay, we'll hand it over to you, Lisa. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I am so excited to be presenting on culinary heritage. And let's see, guys, I'm not seeing, I don't know if you guys are seeing it, but I'm not seeing an Erin showing up on the screen. Oh.
Okay, so
it's in the green room. So I think it just needs to be put up.
Let me see. Let me add it again. It's okay, everyone. Sometimes we get technical difficulties. Try Clicking forward on your side, Lisa, and see. You sharing your screen?
Yeah, I'm not getting it. Hang on. I still see it just sitting in the...
We just went through this actually, and it worked perfectly.
Let me stop sharing and reshare again. Just one moment, if that's okay. Let's see if that'll help it. I know we tested it out and left it there just for that reason.
Yeah, no, and while we're checking that out, welcome Bonnie from Colorado. It's great to have you here. I lived in Littleton for a little while, so that was fun. And thank you, Laurel. You're saying I see both of you. Perfect. Now we just need to make sure that your presentation can be seen.
Yep, it's ready to roll.
Hi, Melanie. Thanks for coming back. You were here this morning too. Thanks for being here.
There we go.
Okay, okay. Bye.
So that moment of panic is over with now, guys. I'm feeling good about that. Okay, let me just get where I can see what I need to see, and we are ready to go, guys. So we are going to be talking, as I said, about culinary heritage, and we're going to be looking at the dinner table to find some of our family history, because food is an integral part of our personal heritage and the heritage of our community. So Anthony Bourdain, he was a noted chef, author, and travel documentarian, and he stated that food is everything. He said, food is everything we are. It's an extension of nationalist feeling, ethnic feeling, your personal history, your province, your region, your tribe, your grandma. It's inseparable from those from the get-go. So I think it's a wonderful thing that we're talking about, all about food, and how we're going to be talking about how we can find our family history and find clues to research even our ancestors in the foods that we eat, the foods that we ate as children, and that they grew up with as well. We're also going to be talking a little bit more too about the benefits of it and how that helps our families. We're going to talk about how to find out if you don't know anything about your culinary heritage and the foods in your family. We're going to talk about how to learn about that. And also, one of the most important things I think is that we're going to talk about some connections and explore how to connect with future generations based on food traditions. And so, because I think at the end of the day, I think that's why we do genealogy. I think that's why we pursue family history. It's for connection to the past, the present, and the future. Okay, so this is interactive a bit, guys. I want you to sit back and I want you to think. I want you to think about the most important events in your life, okay? Or maybe it's a period of time in your life. You maybe think about events from your childhood, things that were big to you. Things, maybe it was young adult, okay? Maybe you're remembering Christmas, you're remembering holidays, maybe you're remembering graduations, birthdays, marriages, some type of celebration. Was it typically celebrated with a special meal or a special cake? Did your family have a special meal that they did, something they did at the dinner table that was for every important occasion or for that particular birthday? Or maybe your memories actually take you back to a time where maybe you were experiencing a loss or a difficult transition. I dare say at that point, your family and friends were caring for you by bringing food. They took care of your needs. And typically, these foods would have been very much comfort types of foods. For some reason in the South, I always think about coconut cake. I'm not really sure why, but that tended to show up within the communities that I lived in. So how did you feel? So you remembering this, maybe you've got that idea of a specific dish or a specific food in your head. How did it make you feel? Think about the feelings that you come up with. Did you feel comforted? Did you feel cared for, acknowledged? So we can see foods that we eat evoke strong emotions, from celebration to caring to acknowledgement through a community. So food was very, very important, as we know. So the cooks and the foods that we cook and the foods that we eat also tell stories of who we are and where we've been. So they talk about how a community cares for each other. And so it's a challenge. The challenge before us, the challenge before you and for me, is really to discover our own culinary heritage and what it means to us as individuals. Now, I do want to take a moment here and just talk about what about non-traditional families, because I do recognize that You may have grown up in a less traditional style family, maybe, or a less than ideal family situation. That's okay. Maybe you don't even know much about your family's origins. That's okay, because your family doesn't have to be biologically related for you to tap into your culinary heritage. Okay, this is your story. It is your heritage, however that looks, and you can experience those memories of family and foods you ate just as they were. All right, so your personal culinary history. That I really feel when we're looking at culinary heritage, we need to tap into our senses, all of our senses, but especially our sense of smell and our sense of taste. And again, they have that ability to trigger so many emotions. The smell of popcorn. When I say that, that probably sends your thoughts sending right back to maybe a fun afternoon at a movie theater. So, there's that movie theater popcorn. When I smell popcorn, it doesn't matter where I am, I'm probably going to initially think of that movie theater. If it's burned popcorn smell, I'm probably going to remember a time when my dad burned his popcorn because he loved to cook popcorn on top of the stove. A taste of a pecan pie instantly could remind you of those competitive contests that you might have had with your cousins over who picked up the most or the best pecans for your grandmom's pie. So think back about that for a moment. Think about that childhood table once again, okay? And there's larger community gatherings. What food comes to mind? Can you smell it? Can you still taste it when you think about it? Because our foods do create those senses there. For me, it's the smell of cornbread, okay? Smell of cornbread, one whiff, will instantly take me back to my grandmother's kitchen. Now, I'm going to be honest, her kitchen was not anything special. It was just your basic kitchen shaped like an L. It had virtually no counter space or room for more than one person in that kitchen at a time. So how they squeezed three cooks in there at Thanksgiving, I'll never know. But it really was a tight fit. But Thanksgiving always had to have grandmom's cornbread. And each year she made full Southern foods. Those tables always had Southern favorites. We had black-eyed peas, collard greens, mashed potatoes, and lots of sweet tea. So if you had any doubts before, there's no doubt that I come from a Southern family, right? Now, I have to make a confession at this point, which is kind of, I think, a little bit ironic, but as much as these Southern foods appeared annually on the family table of celebrations, I actually don't really like a lot of the foods, the Southern style foods. Black-eyed peas and collards, guys, I'm sorry, I won't touch them. But the cornbread, oh yes, I will always have the cornbread because I could watch my grandmother make that cornbread. This is my grandmom right here, Anita Talbot. This was famous cornbread. Maybe only famous in our family, but this was her famous cornbread. There was no recipe. It was never required or ever used. And it took us years to actually get a recipe written down on paper. And even then, it's really just our best approximation because there were no measurements. She didn't measure anything, right? It was self-rising cornmeal and buttermilk were the main ingredients. And it was not cornbread if it was not baked in her cast iron skillet. Now, she was kind of a small lady, barely 5 feet tall, but let me tell you, she can wield that cast iron skillet like a pro. So once it was done, once that cornbread was on the table, we immediately cut that cornbread and served it, cut the butter, passed it, and got the butter on the cornbread. And this all took place before the blessing took place because this was cornbread and this was serious business. So grandmom's cornbread, why do I share that story? Because cornbread for me, for many in my family, for my brother and my cousins, it serves to really ground us in our family. It is a very significant part of our family's culture. And while I don't necessarily I love the cornbread and I don't necessarily like all the Southern foods, I can appreciate what it took for my ancestors to grow the foods that they grew because they were farmers. They grew what they ate. And I can appreciate that. And I'm very grateful for that. It also, from a genealogy research standpoint, it gives me a really good idea of where they might have lived in the terrain and the farmland that they might have lived in to actually grow these specific foods. So it grounds us in our family, it grounds this type of food, cornbread, grounds me in a Southern heritage, and it helps me move my research forward even just a little bit to give me some locations. So what about your family? How do you find out what your family and ancestors ate? Maybe you grew up like I did going to these family reunions, but maybe not. Maybe you live too far away, and so those traditions really didn't necessarily go from generation to generation, but that's okay. You're not off the hook. There's certainly ways to figure this out. So let's talk about how we can discover those foods and what kinds of clues that we can possibly discover, because really it's in these foods. Not only can we get clues to where they might have lived here in America, but we can start picking up clues for where they originated before coming to America. All right, first up, guys, ask your family. The first thing you can do, ask the family members to share the memories of the foods they had when growing up. Everybody will have a little bit different memory. You may have very similar memories, but somebody's probably, I dare say that my brother might have enjoyed the black-eyed peas much more than I did. And so therefore that might play a prominent memory that didn't necessarily always come down to my memory. So check with your family and check with those distant relatives. Those of you who have followed me on or heard any of my other talks know that I am a big proponent of talking with your family, and not just your immediate family. Start looking at those more distant aunts and uncles and cousins, because again, different generations, different family lines have different memories of certain occasions. And even within the book that I was mentioning, the 100 Questions for Grandma, I actually devote several questions talking about food and food at the dinner table, food for celebrations, and a variety of other ways to look at it, because food gets people talking. There we go. All right, so once again, I want you to think back to those early years when your family gathered for those social occasions. What foods did you see consistently showing up on those at that family Christmas dinner, that family reunion? What were they? You may not actually remember the name of them. You may never have known the name of them, and that's okay. Just write it down, but be intentional about, when we're done tonight, just sitting down and thinking back, okay, what did we have on the family Christmas dinner? What did we have at that family reunion every June? Write it down, okay, so that you don't forget. And then you can actually Google it if you're not sure what it was, or you may want to reach out to other family members as well. I mean, it could have been just pizza, and that's perfectly okay. I've seen that too. Now, another resource are family photos when it comes to looking for getting clues to your culinary heritage and finding the foods that we ate. You want to make sure we're pulling them out of the shoe boxes, okay? Because on special occasions, such as family reunions, holiday, birthdays, they were family gatherings. Photographs were often taken, and they were often taken of the food. As you can see in this picture, oftentimes I see groups around a food table when the photograph was taken. These are sometimes not very, I should say not very good quality photographs. So oftentimes they're not necessarily very clear. Some of my favorite ones are actually going to be the more candid photographs of these family reunions. Oftentimes somebody was just taking candid photographs, and they'll capture the table, they'll capture people eating. That's another really good way to see what was being served and what showed up for that particular year, or year over year, but if you have multiple years of photographs. So I find those to be actually pretty interesting, because this was a way, when families got together, they were showing the abundance. They were showing how they, again, cared for each other, and men and women could show off their favorite recipes, their best pies, their best fried chicken, whatever it was that they had. So this was a way to do that. Now, I do have a photograph I wanted to show you, and I think this is one of my favorite photographs. So this is an example of a very candid photograph. To be honest, it's not that great a photograph. I will, in full honesty, tell you that when I digitized it, I did colorize it, and I did some editing to kind of clean it up the best I could, because as you can tell, it is blown out there. The color's blown out the bottom. Let me grab my pointer real quick. So you can see here, we have this table, and it's not necessarily the best picture. in the world. I'm not even sure that in today's, with all the cell phones, that this would probably have been one that got deleted. But anyway, here we have it. So this is, again, taken in about 1946. This is rural North Carolina, down close to the Cape Fear River. And the occasion is the birthday of this gentleman right here, who is the family patriarch, Suggs Howard. So this is his birthday. This did occur every year. Now, one of the things that I love is I've got this wonderful table. And even though the photograph is not the best quality, there's still quite a bit I can get and understand what's happening. So let me show you. I've got it close to remember this. Here we go. So I just kind of got it a little bit bigger so you guys could see, because I want to walk through a little bit of what is in this photograph. Now, there's a ton of, let me go back one for just a minute. There is a ton of information from a genealogical standpoint, a social history standpoint, that we as researchers can get from this particular photo. We can get everything from social history by looking at the house. We can get personalities by looking at postures. And of course, we can get ages and who's important, who's showing up at these, all from the photograph. But again, we're just going to specifically look at the food for tonight. Now, this is the left side of that table. Now, for some reason, I'm not really sure, but there was always white bread, sliced white bread at the family reunions, as well as frequently today. Even today, we'll see that frequently. This is fried chicken back here. I will tell you, the little girl in the photo, you can see right here, this is actually my mother. So I did verify with her. She said, yes, fried chicken certainly was there at the table. This was another this may have been fried fish because they were on a river, close to a river. Here we have some of the canned vegetables because the family did grow their own food. They did can their own vegetables. Even the attendees would have done that as well. Coming down here, we have the bucket with the handle on it. Now, for this particular family, this was actually water. This was drinking water. And the reason I know that, well, one, I did ask my mother, but two, it made sense. When I look back here, if you look at this photo and you look at this house, what I discovered, I started to suspect it. And then when I verified it, this house had no running water. And so this was from the well. So this was where they got the water from the well. Again, and then coming on down here, we have the ever-present white layer cake. There's a lot of white on this table when it comes to this. We have the white bread, and of course we have the white layer cake, frequently seen at these gatherings as well. So that's a lot. If there's, again, any doubt, this is the whole other side of my family. Again, very strong Southern roots, very typical Southern fare at a table. But your family may look actually a little different. So it would be very different if when I go to my friend's house who lives down the street, one of my best friends, I'm going to enjoy a delicious meal of beans and rice and plantains. Okay, this is from her Puerto Rican heritage. And I will just tell you, these are some of the best beans and rice you'll ever have. But perhaps, though, you are enjoying, you remember an interesting dessert from your childhood, and it's grape juice, right? This is actually called pelamushi. I recognize I probably mispronounced that greatly, so just bear with me. It is actually it's very gelatinous dome-shaped dessert. Okay, it's made of grape juice and cornstarch and has one walnut on top. If you actually enjoyed, if this was something that you experienced, this would have been probably reflecting some of your Georgian heritage. So this is a very popular and common dessert from Georgia, and it is really quite delicious. I've actually had this before. So we can look at these photos. I don't remember the name of this bread, but this is a very typical. This is bread filled with cheese and the egg right there. Again, a very typical and common food for the Georgian heritage, and it's absolutely delicious. So think back about some of those foods. You may not, what was normal for you, such as my friends having the beans and rice and the plantains, was not normal for where I grew up. And so it speaks to those roots. So what do your food traditions say about your family roots, okay? Consider what it has to say about your ancestors, what it is about your family roots. When we're done tonight, take some time and really sit down and think about it. Think about what are those recipes that you had, or those foods that you commonly ate. Maybe it was a dessert, but maybe it was just a particular type of fruit or a particular type of vegetable that your family ate. Hang on, I'm gonna grab a sip of water real quick. Hang on one second. Okay. But consider and write it down and start exploring that. And you may want to make some of your own, maybe recreate those over the next few months. So it turns out that our food really can tell us a lot about where we came from, because what our ancestors ate really reflects more than just their taste, more than just what they liked. The foods that they ate actually represent what was available to them. And it can also represent a little bit about the economy where they lived as well. In America, we're often referred to as a nation of immigrants. And as immigrants left their homelands and they came to America, they really carried very little with them. They carried what they could literally carry oftentimes. And it was hard. They were leaving everything they knew to come to a new land. But within themselves, they could carry their food traditions from home. How they cooked food, how they preserved food. That didn't require any space to carry. That was their knowledge, and that was buried deep within them. So they could bring that. So often when they would land in America, they would grow similar crops. They might pursue very similar work to what they were used to in their home country. So if a family came from a family of fishermen, oftentimes those men were trying to go back into working as a fisherman when they came to America, because that was something that they knew how to do. They were fishermen. They knew that. They knew how to put food on the table. Women would oftentimes cook what they knew, and they would preserve the foods that they knew. Now, they might have to change and make substitutions. We see that along the way. Certainly, I don't want to say that didn't happen. But when you have left everything you know, but you can recreate a dish that tastes the same, or you can eat that food that you ate back home with your relatives that you no longer see. They're familiar with that. That gives them connection, and that is something that they're going to, and it brings them comfort. So they're going to continue to do that here as well. Historic cookbooks are actually wonderful resources for this type of information, and I would encourage you to seek those out. That would be another fun topic sometime to talk about, but it would be to explore some of those historic cookbooks for these types of foods brought over that might have found their way to your dinner table as well. So we've talked about discovering our own family's culinary heritage, because we looked at the foods that would show up on our table, right? We've looked at what showed up in family photographs, and we've talked about about having those conversations with families for learning more about that heritage. Well, let's think a little bit more about some of the ethnic type heritages that might be new to you. Now, I'm going to assume that most of us are genealogy researchers. We're interested in family history. And most of us, I would say the majority, have probably taken a DNA test at this point to learn a little bit more about our ancestry. And so certainly I think that it's a real popular thing too for a lot of non-genealogy and non-family historian folks to take that, because people are interested to learn about their ethnic heritage and where they came from. You may have made a surprising discovery when you took your DNA. That's certainly not out of the ordinary these days, but you can find maybe your ethnic makeup was a little different than you actually thought. Maybe you discovered you have German ancestry, or maybe you discovered new to you Scandinavian roots. That could have been happening. So, but you start to recognize that within your DNA that your heritage is more than you realize. And maybe it sparked your interest to learn a little bit more about that culture and how it's represented in you. So the question quickly becomes, well, so how do we do that, right? Exploring foods and food traditions of a particular culture is one of the easiest and fastest ways to understand that culture. Now, my daughter, Sarah, is a foodie. Okay, I will straight up. She is a foodie. She has been since she was a little girl. She is my child who was always willing to eat anything. She would taste anything. Going grocery shopping was actually an adventure with her because she was 2 years old. I could turn away for just a moment, turn back, and I would find her munching and chewing on a mushroom or a piece of broccoli that she has pulled out of the back of the grocery cart. Oh, well, I couldn't get too upset because at least she was eating vegetables is all I could think about. But she loved food that much. And today she actually enjoys a career as a dietitian. So as an adult though, Sarah wanted to take her DNA test. Of course, right? She's my child. She's a genealogist child, right? Even though I could tell her what it was saying, but what she had discovered, and this was, that she knew about, she is 50% of her heritage is Eastern European Jewish. And with my genealogy research into my husband's side of the family, we knew that the family came from what is today known as Lithuania. So it was imperialist Russia at the time. Today it is known as Lithuania, and more specifically, southwestern Lithuania. But for Sarah, this did something. She wanted to connect more deeply with that Jewish heritage and those of her Lithuanian roots. So she started exploring their food. And we had no real food traditions on that side of the family. So we didn't have a lot to pull on as from the sense of, what was served at holidays, what was served, for birthday. We just didn't have that background. So she just went off to the library. She went to the library and she started checking out cookbooks. She checked out cookbooks, multiple cookbooks on traditional Jewish foods. And she discovered and checked out a Lithuanian cookbook. She started exploring used bookstores online and in her town where she lived for those more traditional Jewish cookbooks. But she didn't actually stop there. She kept going. She actually enrolled in an online course titled A Seat at the Table, A Journey into Jewish Food. And this was sponsored by the OVO Institute for Jewish Research. But why did she go that far? Well, Sarah wanted to discover not just the foods themselves and how to make them, but she wanted to understand the meaning behind those traditional foods in respect to her Jewish culture. But still, guys, she still didn't stop there because she still recognized that her ancestors came from a part of the world that had been Russia, that her roots were Eastern European. So she started exploring bakeries and restaurants in the area where she lived that specialized in Eastern European foods. And this was so much fun. She attended festivals. She really went headfirst into this. And as the genealogist in the family, my little heart was like pitter patter, because it just made me so proud. But Sarah really wasn't really concerned about who was on the family tree or who begat who, on the family tree. She wanted to understand the culture and the ethnic and how she could relate to it. And she was relating with it through food. It resonated really within her soul about the foods. And so by understanding not just what they were, but what they meant, she was able to be reminded of her roots. And so she continues to explore those to this day. And this is something you can do too. You do not have to do the extensive that she did to find enjoyment, but it's out there and it's available, and it is a wonderful way for us to connect. It's also a wonderful way to help maybe those who were, those in the family who kind of find our genealogy talk boring sometimes. This is a way to show them what they, a way to help them connect to their foods and to their heritage that's a little more fun for them. Now, a couple of things I wanted to share with you is that during the pandemic, entrepreneurs got very, very creative and started offering live online cooking classes. And so we can take online cooking classes that are offered by chefs and cooks around the world, literally around the world, on sites like Airbnb and Rhodes Scholars. It's not very expensive, but the absolute wonderful thing about these classes is that because they are live, we can actually talk to the chef. We can talk to the cook who's helping us through it. So if you have Italian ancestry, then maybe you take a class here on making gnocchi and ravioli at home. Not only do you learn how to make a fabulous food, but maybe you start to learn about the heritage. Maybe your grandmother made that, and so you're wanting to learn how to make it too. But you can start to talk talk to your chef, ask him questions about where he lived and why this food and why it's made with this particular flour, and all of those questions you can start to connect there and connect in that particular way. It's a really fabulous way to do it. It's a ton of fun, absolute ton of fun, and not very expensive, really. So I would encourage you to try that kind of thing. It's a fun activity that you could do, as a family as well. Okay, so we're talking about ethnic. We can explore that ethnic makeup through food, and it is very, very easy to do that. And you can start making those connections, and you can start exploring recipe books, and you can just recreate dishes in your own kitchen and really tap into the generations that came before you. So what about creating your own food legacy? Have you considered this? Because as you learn about and connect with your family and your ancestors and those food traditions, consider the food traditions and culinary heritage really are not stagnant. It changes. And you can actually create your own food legacy for your own children and future generations. Because one of the benefits of exploring our culinary heritage is honoring and connecting with those ancestors. It's that connection that we're seeking, and it feels that innate need of belonging that we often have. And it gives our children, as we create that, something bigger. It's that sense of belonging and groundedness that we can pass down. Miriam Weinstein, the author of The Surprising Power of Family Meals, states that the family meal encloses us and strengthens the bonds that connect us with other members of our self-defined clan, shutting out the rest of the world. I just love that quote. Because again, our culinary heritage, it is about us as a family. And since it's not static, how can we start to consider creating those food traditions going forward? Because as couples get married, they bring their own family identity into a new family. It includes their foods, it includes their traditions. And certainly today, with people moving about more and further distances apart, we are seeing more blending of different types of traditions. So what can we do? All right, so one of the first things we can do is certainly try a new recipe in the kitchen. We can do this ourselves. We can do this with children. Again, I bring this up with children a lot because it is such a wonderful way to connect with children, with grandchildren, is in the kitchen, because food helps. Food gets people talking. All right, again, definitely pulling out those old photos and going over those old photos. Now, I doubt there's a teenager out there who doesn't take pictures of their food, right? I think we can see that. Ask to see those. Look at those and see what they're eating, what they're interested in. Compare them to previous and older photos that we have of foods that we might have had. I think that's a wonderful way to do it. And talk with each other. Reminisce about your favorite foods with your family. This is one that I hadn't really thought too much about till I was putting this together, and I was like, oh wow, yeah, we actually do this in our family. So one of my husband's, to give you an example, one of my husband's favorite candies growing up was this thing called a cow's tail. Now, it's some kind of long, chewy chocolate thing. But we came across it during one vacation with our kids. And he was so excited. He was telling the kids about how excited he was to see it and be able to have it again. And this is, he always went down to the corner store and he would get one. And so he was really reliving some of his childhood. And of course, we all got one and tried it. So now whenever we see one, and we don't see them very often, but we always remember that story, and we always remember that vacation together, and we always reminisce about that. So it's a fun way of sharing that story and connecting to the kids to realize that, hey, dad wasn't always a grown-up. Yeah, he was a kid too. It's kind of fun. So that was a lot of fun as well. And then again, of course, you can also we would do that and reminisce about favorite foods, but also going to some of the food festivals in town as well. All right. So why culinary heritage? Why is this so important? Why am I so passionate about it? Why is Roots Tech so passionate about it? It's because food is about connection. It's about connection to self. So it gives us a sense of identity. It's about connection to our family and grounding us in our current and past generations. It connects us to our community. It gives us an identification in a community that is beyond just our family. And it is a connection to future generations. It truly is a foundation for those future generations. So Mashama Bailey, she's the executive chef at The Gray, says, whenever you get a bunch of people at a table, you learn about the people at that table. The young folks learn about their elders. They learn about their culture and listen to stories about the past. Isn't that what we're here for? All right, guys, so I'm going to come back and share and take any questions that you might have. Feel free. I do have other articles about culinary heritage over on the website, or if you're looking for genealogy stuff, you're welcome to pop over there at some point and see that as well. So let me stop sharing so I can come back and see you guys.
Hello. That was amazing. And we got some really great questions too. So I'm excited to put these up here and have you answer them. Also, I'm really hungry. I don't know about
I see somebody said they love cow's tails. I've never seen them. I really don't see them very often anymore either. One of the original. Oh, that is barley sticks. Oh, I've heard of those actually.
We remember that. So my grandma and her family were from Idaho. They were farmers in Idaho. Mm-hmm. And we grew up eating these, like, they're called Idaho spuds. I don't know if anyone remembers, but they're basically marshmallows covered in chocolate and covered in coconut. Oh. But growing up, we always used to get them. And when my mom would give them to us, she would tell us stories about my grandma growing up in Idaho. So it was like a tie-in to all of those things and the potato farmers in Idaho. So I love that, food can do this for us. So awesome. Okay. Oh, good question from OVO Oils. I saw this one coming through. I've always been curious here in the USA why we Americanize certain cultural foods and where that comes from. Do you know? I always enjoy more food in country the way it was meant to be enjoyed.
Yeah, I agree. I enjoy it more in the country, the original form. I'm not really sure about why we actually Americanize. I do know that as when immigrants would come over, sometimes they didn't always have the exact ingredients that they used, or the exact, vegetable that they might have used back at home that they could use here. So they would have used the closest thing they could have had. So I definitely see some of that transitioning happening that way. But we do have a tendency to want to Americanize more. I think more and more those cultural foods. And yeah, I'm with you. I definitely would prefer to see it. I prefer it more in the country in the original form.
I've always been, when you brought up the DNA information, that was super curious to me too. And we did get a question about DNA. So I'll ask that one first. From Got You, they say, my DNA test told me I shouldn't like cilantro, but I really like it, although I kind of forced myself to. Now I can't get enough. Cilantro on everything. Oh. What are your thoughts on? I mean, I know you talked about DNA and all of that, but yeah. I've never seen that somewhere too. What?
I've heard about that one and definitely have seen that. I do think that we can have a tendency to, in the case of cilantro, either like it or not. Some people say it tastes like soap. Other people truly love it. But I also think that we can acclimate our palates to it as well. I didn't used to really like it. It oftentimes tasted soapy to me. In fact, I think I just had it enough that it didn't bother me anymore, and I started to enjoy it. So, but I'm the only one in my family like that too. I typically leave it off of things, or I'll put it on the side. So, I do think I think we can acclimate our palates to things. I'm not a DNA expert on that particular type thing. Well, I'm not a DNA expert at all, but yeah. But I know who to ask.
It just made me think of the first comment and how we Americanize, which maybe that's more related to palate and what you're more attuned to. I have no idea, but it's a very curious thing that it could be related to region, perhaps. I don't know. Beth from Facebook is asking, can you post that quote?
I can. I think I'm going to take a guess that she's talking about the last quote.
I think so, because that comment came in towards the end.
Let me see if I can grab it real quick. I'm going to see if I can copy and paste it here for you. Let me see. Oh, wait a minute. I don't know that I can get in the chat as a guest. Let me try it. Connect your YouTube. I cannot. Okay. How about
even post it after the fact?
Yeah, I was saying, can I post it after the fact? Because it's not going to let me. For some reason, the stream platform's not letting me into the chat.
No problem. We'll post it after the fact. And I think to that point, if there's anything else that you wanted to share, like if you're willing to share any of your slides or information, we can always, whatever you're willing to share. I'm sure people love that. So we can
sure.
post it later too. And it's really easy for us to post it in the session on rootstech.org, by the way, just so everyone watching knows where to go to get that information. Okay, there was one up a minute ago from Echo Webster. Echo, I love that name. Hello, I'm a New Zealander watching from Poland. This is interesting. I've never really thought about what my ancestors ate. I never really thought about it either, but it is an interesting way to feel connected to them.
I was the same way. And when I started looking at it from kind of an economic way, and recognizing, because I'm going to tell you, butter beans show up on pretty much every family table, whatever the occasion is. And I cannot stand butter beans. I haven't liked them since I was a little girl. And it's a big family joke. So that's actually part of the culinary heritage, is actually what I don't eat. But they did, because they're so easy to grow in Eastern North Carolina. I mean, that was what they had. And they didn't have anything, the cornbread. Well, in exploring the history of that a little bit more within the family, my dad said, well, they had it pretty much at every meal because they were poor. They didn't have anything. And they had corn, and they made, they could grind corn and make cornbread all the time. So that was definitely, obviously they lived in a place where you can grow corn. So that, they were not living, in an area that didn't support that. So it was
that's interesting too. It kind of gives you a little history lesson or some clues into what was going on at that time, and whether they were eating preserved food or fresh food. And that's a really interesting point. Irate Ziegorder, and thanks for joining us on Facebook, says, thanks for the perspective. I've never thought about food like this. It definitely makes me appreciate food more.
Oh, you are welcome. I'm so excited about that. And I think that kind of, as I was sharing the story with my daughter and her search into the meaning behind the foods, I was just so impressed when she said, Mom, I signed up for this course. I'm like, wait, you did what? And, again, she could care less about genealogy research, but by connecting it to the food, she's like, oh, wow. And that she really wanted to understand, the meanings behind that. And I was just so impressed with her, and I've learned a lot with her as well. So
I'm actually so glad that you brought that up, and it made me think of something. There's sometimes when I feel, or other people in my life will say, oh, I feel so bad, I'm not doing my family history, or I feel like I should do more, or whatever. But by preserving family memories through food, you're preserving as a huge part of family history, so that there's records to be found. And I truly believe that these are, on Family Search, you can actually upload memories to your profile, and it's really, you can upload recipes to your profile. We just announced a cookbook that we're doing. It's a global cookbook collaboration where you can submit recipes, and we're going to collect them from all over the world, but we'll be preserving them in a book that, you can have and preserve them that way. So preservation is a big part of this work too.
I think so too. And you're absolutely right. I do think that preserving your family, your family history, if you are preserving, those meals, if you are preserving those, and connections and taking them forward, that's family history, certainly. And it's community history as well. I love being able to get together with my friends who are from, my best friend's from Puerto Rico, and just, that is some of the best food. She's a wonderful cook. But to be able to connect and try those different foods when I travel, I love to eat at the different restaurants and different types of food, just to kind of get that experience.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love that. We have a comment from Beth Snyder that I think is really touching. Beth says, my mother passed away in May, and one of the more fun tasks that I've undertaken was to take her recipe box, sort the recipes, and scan them in so that I can share them with all of my family. What a treasure.
Oh, that is wonderful. That is a fabulous way to preserve those memories. And I just think that is, you and your family will really treasure that going forward.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And they were on earlier this morning. There's two sisters that started helping preserve family memories through recipes and other things with handwriting. So if you have any that you have in actual handwriting, which it sounds like if it's from your mom, they probably are. They do the coolest things. They actually have these wooden recipe cards where they can etch the recipe on it. And the reason they did that is because one of their daughters spilled water on an older recipe and it just kind of, evaporated. The ink did, and she was so devastated. And so they started creating them on wood with the etched original handwriting, which I thought was so cool. That's Relive Designs. I love that. I love this. Pam has a comment too that I thought was really cool, and it gave me another thought too. Interested in entry food or retry food?
Retry food, I think.
Oh yes, I have asked all cousins to send one family recycle for an upcoming reunion.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, actually, for your reunions, have everyone bring or do a potluck and have everyone make something from a recipe that reminds them of their childhood. I bet you'd have some fun stories to tell.
Oh yeah, definitely. I know the last one we had for pre-COVID, we have an annual family reunion that's been going on in December for over 70 years at this point. It was virtual for a couple of years, but we always had somebody bring something. We're like, oh, that is Aunt Violet's cheese dip. Now it's honestly, I don't know that it's necessarily anything special, but it was Aunt Violet's cheese dip. And it was whatever recipe she was that we always made that, so people still make that recipe today. And we always remember and talk about Aunt Violet when we have it.
Oh, I love that. That's so touching. I think that's really cool. And then Gail has another comment that's just come in. We talk about Americanized food. When I spent time in Europe, a lot of food is also Americanized. That's interesting, Gail. Do they say it in that way in Europe? Do they say it's Americanized? I'd be interested to know. We have cook-offs at our family reunions to share recipes. What a great idea. I just think that's so cool.
A cook-off, that sounds cool.
Yeah.
But that sounds really cool.
Well, we're coming up into fall, and most of you have probably heard of or taken part in a chili cook-off contest. Mm-hmm. So next time you do, bring the recipe. Some of them are secret, but maybe that can be a way to preserve it and share it with the people that you're sharing it with too.
And it goes well with cornbread, just saying.
Good point. I always like that combination.
Oh, that cornbread. Even when my grandmother got older and was no longer really doing any of the cooking, the cornbread, she always did the cornbread. And
I love that.
Those cast iron skillets, those things are heavy.
Oh, they're so heavy. And you know what's a good tip? I just found this, somebody said, I don't know, it might've been on social media, but they were like, look for cast iron. And then they showed you how to fix it up. But at thrift stores, you can find a lot of cast iron and those kind of skillets too, which are really cool because they're not as common because everyone's into the nonstick. But I do think it gives you kind of a richer flavor that reminds you of the past.
Oh, it does, because they're seasoned. They're well seasoned.
Yeah.
With use and things like that. Yeah, definitely. They're actually making a comeback, kind of, I think. When it comes
I think so too. And there's lots of videos that you can find on like Pinterest or whatever about preserving them, but they can be heirlooms because they can last forever, Yeah,
I have my grandmother's. Absolutely.
So awesome. I think that's so cool. Wow, we've had so many amazing comments and I love this. And we can talk. Oh, I wanted to mention one more thing. So Cy Foster, who we're doing the cookbook collaboration with, we were talking to her like a month ago. And she said, a lot of people ask me, how do I preserve my family heritage through food? And because she does that. And I think that you guys should totally connect Lisa because she's such an amazing resource for food heritage. But she said, one of my pieces of advice to people is pick one thing and get really good at it, something that you love, and just make it over and over again and just perfect it. Add your own twist to it so that that's what you're known for. Because I think these days we get so used to the fast food and the quick food and the, oven dinners. Trust me, I'm one of them. But it is, so if there's just one thing that you could be known for, and if it's cheese dip, then all of a sudden it'll be Erin Shirt's cheese dip instead of, Aunt Violet's cheese dip or whatever. Right. So people will remember you through that food, that you put out there to the world. So I thought that was a cool tip.
That is so funny. So my grandfather's second wife, her name was Velma, and she would make the peanut butter chocolate, the no-bake cookies over the oatmeal, the peanut butter, and the cocoa powder stuff, so that are so wonderful.
They're so good.
So she would make those, and she made them for my kids. She made it for us. She made it for my kids, and they go. And we used to nickname them and they were called Choco Bounds. I have no idea what the original name was. And so my daughter goes to school, and so she gets some of these in a package, and she's telling her friend, she thought it was a secret family recipe. And so I'm like, she couldn't believe it. Somebody said, "Oh, we have these in our family." And Sarah goes, "Oh, no, those are chocolate bells."
Her bubble was burst.
But the thing is, I mean, but she had tied that memory, the whole family, to our, our beloved Velma. So it was just so funny. It was just so cute. But again, it's a very simple food. It's not necessarily Southern food or anything like that. But it was very much a food in our family. It was what she was known for, and that made that tie and that connection.
That's so cool. I love Melinda's comment, and I want to put it up really quick. I have my grandmother's cast iron skillet that was a gift at her wedding. Oh, that's awesome. Gifts in those days were often used items, and it was over 100 years old, and she still uses it. So I love this so much, and maybe it's because I'm totally into history, and obviously I'm working in family history now, and you're passionate about family history. I feel like vintage gifts are making a comeback, and maybe that's because we're so used to new. I don't know. What do you think, Lisa? I feel like that's a great idea.
I think it is. I also think it oftentimes goes back to that feeling of connection. And I think having gone through the pandemic, there was so much disconnection. And I think we saw it a lot, particularly with the older population, some of the disconnect and just how difficult it was for, well, not just the older population, for the population in general, and children too, that I think we're looking for. I think it's that connection. And I think when it comes to genealogy research and family history, I think a lot of times, if we really stripped it down to what is it we're actually looking for, I think we are looking to connect with that past and to that meaning. And I think that's what these, I love that skillet. I mean, that's exactly what that skillet is. It's a connection to all those generations.
I love that. And that's something that I want to put out to all those that are watching in the comments, if you feel so inclined. I love to hear what food makes you feel connected to your heritage, to an ancestor, to even a current living family member. What one thing the most, and you can put multiple, I think it'll be fun to see what comes in and what, people think of from all over, because it's definitely different for everyone, but there's meaning behind all of it. I think that's really cool. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for being here, as always. We put a lot of resources out there, including a book that Lisa has written most recently about 100 questions for grandma, which I think is so cool. And she talked a little bit about at the beginning, and other resources too. So please let us know if you'd like access to any of those. If you want links, we will drop the links that we can think of. Lisa, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone. Now go eat dinner and something in a cast iron skillet that has cultural significance to you. That's my challenge.
That says, I'm looking at all their favorite things. I'm like, oh my gosh, this looks really good.
Ooh, now I have to look up some of these too.
Okay, I thought the same thing.
That's fun. Awesome. Well, thank you again. Everyone have a great night.